Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're stepping into Sinners, a film that doesn't just tell a horror story, but breathes history, pain, faith, and music into every frame. This is the kind of movie that doesn't rush to scare you. It lets the Mississippi Delta seep into your bones first. The dust, the heat, the weight of 1932, hanging over every character like a curse that never quite lifts. When I walked out of the theater after watching Sinners, it didn't feel like I'd just seen a movie. It felt like I'd survived a long night inside someone else's memory. Ryan Coogler doesn't announce what kind of film this is right away. He lets you settle in, lets you feel the humanity before he unleashes the horror. And that's what makes it hit so hard. This isn't just about vampires or the supernatural. It's about survival in a world already built to drain you dry. The story opens in 1932, deep in the Mississippi Delta, where the land itself feels tired. Fields stretch endlessly, worked by people who are paid in promises instead of money, trapped by a system that keeps them dependent and silent. Into this world return twin brothers Elijah Smoke Moore and Elias Stack Moore, both played by Michael B. Jordan, in a dual performance that never feels like a gimmick. You immediately sense the difference between them. Smoke carries himself like a man who has seen too much and learned to hold it in. Stack smiles easier, talks faster, moves like he's still trying to outrun something behind him. They World War I veterans who left Clarksdale years ago and survived Chicago's criminal underworld, only to come back home with stolen money and a dangerous dream. From the very first scenes, Coogler frames their return not as a triumphant homecoming, but as a test. Can men who escaped violence ever truly come back without bringing it with them? They buy an old sawmill from a white landowner named Hogwood, a man whose politeness feels rehearsed and whose smile never quite reaches his eyes. The twins want to turn this mill into a juke joint, a place for the local black community to eat, drink, dance, and forget their troubles for a few hours. It's a simple dream, but in Jim Crow, Mississippi, even that feels like rebellion. Their younger cousin Sammy, known as Preacher Boy, tags along, guitar always within reach. Sammy is young, gifted, and torn between faith and music. His father, Jedediah, a preacher, warns him that blues music is sinful, a doorway for the devil. That warning hangs over Sammy like a prophecy. Every time he touches his guitar, you feel both the joy and the fear wrapped up in those strings. As the twins prepare for opening night, the film slows down and lets you live with these people. Smoke reconnects with his estranged wife Annie, a hoodoo practitioner whose belief in spiritual protection clashes with Smoke's grief over their infant daughter, who died while they were away. Stack crosses paths with Mary, the woman he loved and left behind because loving her openly in the South could have gotten her killed. Their reunion is quiet, heavy with everything unsaid. Meanwhile, the juke joint comes together piece by piece. Delta Slim, an aging harmonica legend, joins as a performer. Grace and Bo Chow, Chinese shopkeepers, who also live on the margins of this society, supply food and goods. Cornbread becomes the bouncer, loyal and strong, just happy to be part of something. Ryan Coogler shoots these moments with patience, and knowing the production details makes you appreciate them even more. The film was shot on 65mm film using massive IMAX and Ultra Panavision cameras, and you can feel that weight in every frame. The image isn't just sharp, it's textured. Faces look carved by life. Light cuts through dust and smoke, like something sacred. Autumn Durald Arkapa's cinematography doesn't beautify the past, it honors it. You can tell this film was made by people who wanted the setting to feel lived in, not staged. Even the music, composed by Ludwig Göransson, feels like it's bleeding up from the ground, rather than laid on top of the scenes. Then, opening night arrives. The juke joint fills with laughter, sweat, and anticipation. Sammy steps on stage, and when he starts to play, something changes. The film doesn't explain it right away, but you feel it. His music doesn't just entertain, it reaches. Spirits from the past and future seem to gather, drawn by the sound. It's one of the most powerful sequences in the movie, because it shows art as both salvation and danger. Outside, something else hears that music too. An Irish vampire named Remick, hiding from Choctaw vampire hunters, feels the pull. He's not introduced as a monster at first. He's curious, almost polite, offering money and music in exchange for entry. Smoke senses something is wrong and refuses him. That decision, made in seconds, seals everyone's fate. From here, the film's tone shifts. The joy inside the juke joint clashes with the threat gathering outside. Mary steps out to talk to Remick, thinking she can help. Instead, she comes back inside, changed, seductive, deadly, and Stack never stands a chance. When Smoke discovers what's happened, The horror becomes personal. He shoots Mary, but she doesn't fall. Vampires in this film aren't defeated by simple violence. They're reflections of a system that feeds and never lets go. As the night spirals into chaos, Coogler makes it clear, this evil didn't arrive alone. It was invited by desperation, by injustice, by a world already broken. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Mississippi Delta seemed to hold its breath. Coogler doesn't rush this transition. He lets the shadows grow long, stretches the frame so that each corner of the juke joint feels like a separate room, a separate fate. When the vampires descend, it's not a sudden jump scare. It's an intrusion of wrongness into something that had felt sacred. Smoke realizes too late that Mary is no longer the woman he once knew. Her eyes glow faintly under the dim lanterns, and the bite she delivers to Stack is swift, intimate, and devastating. Michael B. Jordan's dual performance here is remarkable. Stack's charm is still there, even as the camera pulls back to show the inhuman predator he's become. It's tragic, not grotesque. Coogler refuses cheap horror. Chaos erupts, but the scene is orchestrated like a symphony of terror. Every frame pulses with sound. Ludwig Göransson's score bleeds in with low brass and distant blues guitar riffs, while the diegetic music from the juke joint continues almost as a tether to humanity. Smoke fires his gun at Mary, but it has no effect. Cornbread is bitten outside, turning the familiar into the monstrous. Annie, the hoodoo practitioner, becomes the first beacon of knowledge, explaining the rules of these vampires. Sunlight will kill them, but killing one will not free another, already transformed. The movie treats vampirism like the entrenchment of evil in a society that preys on the vulnerable layers of horror beneath the surface of historical reality. The survivors barricade themselves inside. Smoke, Sammy, and Annie improvise defenses, pickled garlic juice, salt lines, and clever use of the mill's structure. Meanwhile, the film doesn't let you forget the real-world horrors underpinning this story. Hogwood, the smiling landowner, is revealed to be the local clan leader. The intersection of supernatural and systemic terror is never subtle. Coogler juxtaposes the vampire's predation with Hogwood's human cruelty, forcing the audience to feel both kinds of danger equally. It's a smart, frightening choice that elevates the horror beyond mere genre conventions. Sammy steps into his own power in these sequences. Coogler frames him on stage, guitar in hand, as both a conductor and a summoner. His music calls spirits to witness, to assist, to inspire. It's a moment that visually recalls the spirits swirling above the Delta, rendered with subtle VFX by ILM and Storm Studios. Each spirit flickers in the edges of frames, ghostly but grounding the film's emotional stakes. This is where Coogler's direction shines. He blends visual spectacle with emotional resonance, making every supernatural moment feel earned. Remick and his hive-minded vampires are methodical predators. When they negotiate with the survivors, offering immortality and freedom in exchange for Sammy, the tension is not just about a fight, it's about choices, ethics, and survival under impossible conditions. The film frames the moral stakes as clearly as the physical ones. Grace Chow's decision to invite vampires into the joint escalates the conflict into a full-scale massacre. The cinematography here alternates between wide IMAX 70mm shots and tight, almost claustrophobic ultra-panavision sequences, enhancing the sense of both grandeur and terror. As the vampires attack, Coogler cuts between chaos on the dance floor, smoke and lanterns, and close-ups of characters' faces, creating a rhythm that is terrifying and hypnotic. Deaths are not just plot points, they are deeply personal. Delta Slim falls while trying to protect the younger musicians. Grace and Beau died defending their daughter. Annie confronts her transformed husband in heartbreak, and Perline succumbs to Remick's manipulation. Every death lands emotionally because the audience has lived with these characters, laughed with them, feared for them. Mary's escape and transformation into a vampire complicates the morality even further, demonstrating that Coogler doesn't rely on black and white narratives. Vampires are monsters, yes, but they are also victims and extensions of the darkness already present in society. Smoke faces Stack in a pivotal confrontation. The choreography is meticulous. Michael B. Jordan embodies both the hunter and the hunted in split-screen sequences and practical effects combined with motion capture. The fight is intimate, painful, and symbolic. Family turned against itself. Love corrupted by circumstance and supernatural force. Smoke's ultimate decision to assist Sammy in defeating the remaining vampires is heartbreaking but necessary. The sunrise finally incinerates the remaining monsters, a visual metaphor for truth, justice, and the fleeting nature of life itself. The film closes the 1932 arc with Smoke's final act of vengeance and protection. Hogwood and his men fall, but Smoke is mortally wounded. His reunion with Annie and their daughter in the afterlife is both a moment of catharsis and sorrow, highlighting the human cost of courage and defiance. Samir's departure to Chicago, defying his father's pleas for salvation, signals the continuation of music, memory, and resistance. In terms of production, the effects and cinematography elevate these sequences. ILM and Storm Studios' practical and digital effects blend seamlessly with RKP's 65mm IMAX and Ultra Panavision footage. Each frame feels like a painting in motion, capturing the textures of the Delta, the heat, the sweat, and the pervasive tension. Ruth E. Carter's costume design honors the era, while providing visual cues about class, identity, and cultural heritage. The juxtaposition of vibrant juke joint outfits with the darker, muted tones of the surrounding world underscores the thematic contrast between life, joy, and oppression. By the time the audience reaches the 1992 epilogue, the tone shifts. Elderly Sammy, now a celebrated blues musician, performs in his club, visited by the ageless Stack and Mary. Coogler doesn't rely on exposition alone. The history is visible in the lines of faces, the posture, the weight of memory. The encounter is bittersweet. Stack's condition reminds us that immortality is not freedom, is exile, burden, and witness to a world that keeps changing while they remain unchanged. Sammy declines their offer of immortality, choosing instead to embrace the fleeting, fragile beauty of human life. It's a poignant conclusion that circles back to the themes introduced at the beginning: survival, memory, music, and the cost of standing against both supernatural and societal evils. Sammy began his journey from Clarksdale to Chicago, carrying with him the weight of memories that refused to fade. The streets were different, yet the echoes of that fateful night at the juke joint haunted him: the laughter, the music, the love, and the loss. Every note he played on his guitar, every word he sang, was imbued with the stories of Smoke and Stack Annie, and the spirits that had once filled that room with light and shadow. The vampires, the horrors, and the miraculous survival, all of it had shaped him, and he carried it forward into each performance. In Chicago, Sammy quickly made a name for himself in the blues scene, but he did more than entertain. He told a story through his music. His performances were layered with the history of the Mississippi Delta, the pain of oppression, the magic of hoodoo, and the courage of those who had stood against darkness. Audiences could feel the raw emotion in his voice, the way it resonated with both joy and sorrow. People came for the music, but stayed for the soul it revealed. One night, as Sammy played in a crowded club, two familiar figures appeared: Stack and Mary. Immortal and ageless, they had returned not to interfere but to witness. The sight of them stirred a wave of emotions in Sammy, a mixture of relief and melancholy. Stack reminded him of the promise Smoke had made, ensuring Sammy could live in peace. Mary offered him immortality once again, but Sammy, wiser now, politely declined. His life, as fleeting and fragile as it was, had meaning precisely because of its limits. The hardships, the heartbreaks, the moments of triumph, they were his alone to live and to honor. Samir's music evolved, intertwining the blues with hoodoo chants and stories of his ancestors. Each song became a living archive, a bridge between the past and present, connecting the audience with the struggles, joys, and resilience of those who had come before. He understood that his role was more than that of a performer. He was a keeper of memory, a voice for those who could no longer speak. Through his melodies, he preserved history and inspired others to remember, to honor, and to continue the legacy. Years passed, and Samir's fame grew. Yet, fame never dulled the pain of that night or the lessons he had learned. He returned to Mississippi often, visiting places that held fragments of his youth and the memories of the fallen Annie, Delta Slim, Grace, Bo, and the others. He played in small clubs and large halls alike, but each time, he honored the juke joint in Clarksdale that had changed everything. He taught younger musicians the importance of story, of history, of carrying the past forward through art. Finally, in a quiet moment at his own blues club, Sammy reflected on everything he had endured. Stack and Mary, watching from the shadows, nodded in silent approval. Sammy realized that while immortality could be offered, true legacy lay in the choices one made, the stories one told, and the lives one touched. As he strummed the final chord of a song dedicated to his family, the spirits of the past seemed to gather, listening, approving, and resting at last. Sammy smiled, knowing that despite the darkness, despite the violence and loss, he had carried the light forward. His music, his memory, his life, it was enough. He had survived, honored, and transformed tragedy into art. The story of Sammy Moore stands as a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of family, music, and culture, and to the unbroken thread of humanity that carries forward through generations. Sinners leaves us with a reminder that even in the darkest moments, courage, love, and creativity can illuminate a path that will never be forgotten. Sammy's reputation as a blues musician spread beyond Chicago, reaching listeners who had never been to the Mississippi Delta but felt the weight of its history through his music. Each note he played carried the echoes of Clarksdale laughter and screams, the triumphs and tragedies, the love that had once filled the juke joint, and the darkness that had tried to consume it. Audiences felt it in their bones, as if the spirits of Smoke, Stack, and the others were there with him, whispering through the strings of his guitar. Sammy was no longer just a performer. He was a vessel of memory, a storyteller whose instrument sang of survival, courage, and heritage. Yet fame brought new challenges. Promoters wanted to commercialize his music, stripping it of the raw emotion that made it powerful. Sammy resisted, insisting that the music could not be diluted. He refused to perform on stages that treated blues as mere entertainment. For him, every performance was a ritual, a way to honor the people who had shaped him. Even as he traveled, he sought out communities reminiscent of Clarksdale, sharing his story and teaching young musicians to play with soul and integrity. He became a mentor, guiding others to channel personal and collective history into their music. Meanwhile, the supernatural events of that night in Mississippi continued to ripple in unexpected ways. Though the vampires had been destroyed and Remek's hive mind broken, the lingering magic of the spirits and hoodoo practices remained tied to the Delta. Some nights, Sammy felt the presence of the spirits as he played a gentle warmth, a reassurance that he carried the right path forward. Other nights, he felt the absence, the ache of what had been lost, the love and lives cut short. These experiences shaped him, deepening his understanding of mortality and legacy. Years later, Sammy returned to Clarksdale to perform at the site of the old juke joint, which had since been rebuilt by the community. The town gathered, many of whom had heard of the legendary night long ago, but never understood its full significance. As Sammy played, the air seemed to shimmer with memory. People whispered, some crying, some dancing, all feeling a connection to the past they had never known firsthand. And there, standing among the shadows, were Stack and Mary, once more, immortal witnesses to the legacy Sammy had built. Their presence reminded him that survival was more than life, it was honoring the memory of those who had given everything to protect what mattered most. Sammy's music grew richer with age, incorporating the stories of his life, the history of his family, and the spirits of those who had come before. He performed with Delta Slim's techniques, the rhythm and cadences taught by his elders, and the subtle elements of hoodoo infused in every note. Each song was a bridge between worlds, the past and present, the living and the dead, the human and the supernatural. People traveled from miles away, seeking the profound experience that was more than music. It was history, ritual, and emotion embodied in sound. In his final years, Sammy realized that the story of Smoke and Stack, of Annie, Mary, Remek, and all the others, had become inseparable from his own. Their struggles, victories, and sacrifices lived on through his songs. And when Sammy's own time approached, he performed a final concert at the rebuilt juke joint, surrounded by friends, family, and admirers who had grown to understand the depth of his legacy. The notes he played that night were more than music. They were a farewell, a remembrance, and a promise that the stories of Clarksdale would never fade. As Sammy laid down his guitar for the last time, he felt the presence of the spirits surrounding him, a gentle acknowledgement of his life's work. He had honored the past, embraced the present, and ensured that the legacy of sinners, the struggles, the music, and the triumphs would echo for generations to come. Stack and Mary quietly departed, leaving Sammy with the understanding that immortality could take many forms, and the most enduring was the one he had chosen: memory and music. The night leaves scars that time refuses to erase, and what happened inside that juke joint continues to echo long after the sun finishes its brutal work. Smoke walks through the silence that follows sunrise like a man already halfway gone, every step heavier than the last, his body carrying wounds deeper than the bullets that will eventually end him. Around him, the remains of the night tell their own story: burned floorboards where vampires turn to ash, overturned tables stained with blood, instruments lying broken, as if even the music couldn't survive what unfolded. Smoke's face holds no victory, only exhaustion and a quiet grief that has been building since the moment he and Stack came back to Mississippi, believing they could carve out something clean from a poisoned land. He knows the danger isn't finished. Because daylight didn't just bring safety, it brought consequences. Hogwood and his men are still coming, fueled by hate that doesn't need the cover of darkness to kill. Smoke sends Sammy away with words that sound calm but carry finality, telling him to leave before the world closes its jaws again. Sammy doesn't want to go, his hands shaking as he grips his guitar, his eyes still full of the night's horrors. But Smoke insists, and there's something in his voice that Sammy understands without explanation. As Sammy walks away, every step feels like betrayal and survival at the same time, and he doesn't know which sin weighs heavier. Smoke stays behind, because this place, this fight, was always his burden to carry. When Hogwood and the clansmen arrive, there's no dramatic build-up, just the ugly efficiency of violence that this land has perfected. Smoke confronts them not with speeches, but with action, ending their threat the only way this world seems to understand. But hate is never alone, and bullets don't care about justice. Smoke is shot, and as his body gives in, the film doesn't rush the moment. Instead, it lets him drift into something softer, something he's been denied his entire life. He sees Annie, whole and warm, their lost child between them, and for the first time since the war, since the streets of Chicago, since the cotton fields of Mississippi, Smoke is at peace. His death doesn't feel like punishment or reward, just an ending that finally allows rest. Years passed quietly after that night, though the silence is deceptive. Sammy carries it all with him: the blood, the music, the choices he didn't make, and Chicago becomes both an escape and a reminder. He builds a life through blues, turning pain into rhythm, memory into sound. Every performance is haunted, but also alive, because the music doesn't just belong to him. It belongs to Smoke, to Stack, to Annie, to everyone who never got to leave. Decades later, when time has bent Sammy's back and softened his voice, the past returns without warning. Stack appears exactly as he was, untouched by age, standing beside Mary, like ghosts who never learned how to fade. There's no shock left in Sammy, only recognition. He's lived too long with the impossible to be surprised by it. They sit together, sharing stories not spoken aloud. And when Stack offers immortality, it doesn't sound like temptation anymore. It sounds empty. Sammy understands something now, that he couldn't that night, living forever. Freedom. If you re-trapped inside the moment, you lost everything. He chooses to stay human, to keep carrying the weight, because that weight is proof he lived, loved, and survived. When Sammy plays for them, the music fills the room, the same way it did that first night. Bending time, pulling memories from places that never truly disappear. Stack listens like someone remembering sunlight, and when they leave, there's no anger, only sadness and acceptance. Sammy admits that despite the terror and the blood, that opening night was the greatest day of his life, because for a brief moment, they were free from fear, from rules, from the future waiting to crush them. Stack agrees quietly, knowing it was the last time he felt human, the last time the world didn't feel like a cage. The film ends not with closure, but with understanding. Some people survive by letting go, others by holding on, and some by turning their pain into something that refuses to die. Sammy sits alone with his guitar, the echoes of the past settling around him. And the music continues not because it has to, but because that's the only honest way to remember everything that was lost and everything that still remains. Smoke's absence leaves a void that can never be fully filled, yet the echoes of that night continue to ripple through Clarksdale and beyond. Sammy, carrying both the grief and the legacy of his cousins, moves through the world as though burdened with histories larger than himself. Every stage he steps onto, every note he plucks, resonates not only with his pain but with the voices of Smoke, Stack, Annie, and the others who gave their lives. In Sammy's hands, the blues becomes more than music. It is a living archive of trauma, joy, love, and death, a medium through which history is sung rather than written, felt by all who listen, even without knowing the story behind it. Arriving in Chicago, Sammy finds the city both familiar and alien. The streets thrum with industry and the restless pursuit of survival and fleeting prosperity. He carries the memory of Mississippi, the cotton fields, the juke joint, and the blood-stained floors, and each performance becomes a ritual of remembrance. His music exorcises the ghosts of that fateful night, while keeping their spirits alive for audiences who sense the authenticity that comes not from training, but from surviving and bearing witness. People are drawn to him, not only for entertainment, but for the raw truths embedded in every note. Back in Clarksdale, the aftermath of the violence continues to ripple outward. Families who lost loved ones attempt to reclaim normalcy, though the memories linger. The Chows struggle to maintain their shop and protect their daughter Lisa after Grace and Boas' deaths. Townspeople speak in hushed tones of the juke joint once, a symbol of hope, now a theater of joy and horror. Even those who did not witness the carnage feel its shadow, passing its story down in whispers, songs, and wary glances, a collective consciousness that can never forget. In Chicago, Sammy encounters young bluesmen, eager to learn. He becomes their mentor, teaching not only techniques and rhythms, but the historical context and stories behind the music. He impresses upon them that blues is more than a genre, it is a lifeline, a way to make sense of suffering, and a vehicle for transforming pain into something that resonates beyond oneself. Through these students, the legacy of Smoke, Stack, and the others spreads, carrying fragments of that night into future generations. Sammy wrestles privately with guilt and unresolved grief. He dreams of Smoke, Stack, and occasionally enter vivid, visceral visions of smoke-filled rooms, burning buildings, and fleeting faces of the departed. He wakes with a taste of ash in his mouth, the echo of footsteps that no longer exist, clinging to his guitar as a tether to reality. The past and present blur, but his music keeps him grounded, each string a lifeline through the storm of memory. Audiences absorb these narratives and, in return, provide a sense of connection, reminding Sammy he is not alone in bearing the weight of history. Even as he travels from club to club, city to city, he remains tethered to Mississippi, to the night that shaped him, and to the bloodline that haunted and protected him. Chicago itself becomes a character in his journey. He witnesses the migration of black families from the South, bringing culture, music, and stories that enrich the city's landscape, but attract those who would exploit or harm them. Sammy navigates the city cautiously, aware that danger can appear in daylight as easily as in darkness. Forming alliances with musicians, business owners, and community leaders, he discovers that survival depends on connection as much as talent. In these alliances, he finds fragments of the family he lost and works tirelessly to protect them. Though focused on music and mentorship, Sammy cannot escape his past. Rumors of supernatural occurrences echo the horrors of Mississippi. Though he dismisses many as fanciful, a knowing fear persists that some elements of that night remain unresolved, that remnants of the evil he faced still linger. This tension drives him to explore the intersection of music, memory, and the unknown, using his art as both shield and weapon. Sammy's personal life grows complicated. He experiences love, but struggles to reconcile desire with loyalty to the memories that define him. Friendships are deep, yet fragile. Trust must be earned and protected. Each human connection becomes a balancing act between vulnerability and survival, mirrored in his careful crafting of music. Over time, Sammy records songs that capture the essence of his experiences. Vinyl and tape carry not only his voice, but echoes of those who perished. Each release draws attention and admiration. While the world may forget the specifics of that night, the soul of it lives on in art, music, and collective memory, preserved in the resonance of his work. Through mentorship, performance, and recording, Sammy becomes a conduit for history, a living bridge between past and present. He visits old friends, communities, and family, carrying stories that must survive. With each journey, he collects fragments of experience, embedding them in rhythm and passing them to those who will listen. This network of influence stretches far, a web of people who share in the memory of Mississippi, the juke joint, and the night of blood and music that defined him. Despite everything, Sammy is drawn back to Clarksdale, walking familiar streets, visiting the ruins of the juke joint, and speaking quietly to survivors. He pieces together a mosaic of experiences to contextualize his trauma. These pilgrimages are private, solemn, and necessary, helping him reconcile pain with the beauty that emerged after tragedy. Sammy confronts the moral complexity of survival. He wrestles with guilt for escaping, while others did not, for living when many were lost, and for profiting from a legacy born in tragedy. Through introspection and dialogue with trusted peers, he understands that survival is itself a form of resistance, that carrying stories forward and ensuring the past is never forgotten is a sacred responsibility. His personal grief transforms into collective memory, trauma into teaching, music into a vessel of cultural preservation. As decades pass, Sammy becomes a revered figure in the blues community, known not just for skill, but for the depth of history and emotion in his playing. Musicians, historians, and fans seek him out. Sammy embraces this role reluctantly, understanding that while he never sought fame, he carries the responsibility to honor the lost and the stories he bears. He witnesses cultural and societal shifts, civil rights movements, changes in music, and the evolution of the city itself. Through it all, Sammy remains a constant living link to the night that defined him, the bloodlines that shaped him, and the music that carried him. His performances educate, commemorate, and keep alive the memory of a world that demanded witness. Even as his body ages, Sami continues performing, teaching, and recording. His legacy becomes intertwined with the cultural fabric of Chicago and the broader world of blues. Young musicians carry fragments of his teachings, ensuring the story of Smoke, Stack, Annie, and the juke joint endures. The horrors of that night are never forgotten, but neither are the courage, love, and resilience that emerged from it. The influence of the Mississippi Night follows Sami wherever he goes, and by now Chicago has become more than a city. It is a canvas, a stage, a place where his music and his memories intertwine to shape his own legend. Every street corner and smoky club feels infused with the ghosts of the past. The echoes of Smoke and Stack, of Annie, Pearline, and Delta Slim, linger not as tormentors, but as guides, their presence embedded in the rhythms Sami plays and the way he navigates the world. In the quiet moments between performances, Sami often revisits that night in Clarksdale, mentally reconstructing the events, the faces, the music, and the blood. The memories are painful but necessary, reminding him why the blues he creates carries such weight, why every note must bear the history it comes from. Despite the respect he earns, life in Chicago is far from safe. The city hums with a tense, interracial social and economic pressures press against its inhabitants, and violence is never far from the surface. Sami learns to navigate these hazards with the same intuition he developed in Mississippi. Trust is precious, and vigilance is essential. He forms alliances with fellow artists, community leaders, and patrons who understand the significance of preserving the cultural and historical narrative embedded in his music. Through these alliances, Sami secures spaces for performance and learning, carving out sanctuaries where the arts and history are protected from the chaos of the wider world. Amidst this, Sami occasionally confronts the supernatural echoes that haunt him. Strange occurrences, unexplained shadows, fleeting figures, subtle shifts in sound remind him that the events of that night were extraordinary, and that some remnants may remain. Rather than fear these manifestations, Sami approaches them with caution, respect, and ritual, sometimes incorporating their presence into his music to preserve the memory and give form to experiences that defy explanation. He develops an acute awareness of the thin boundaries between life, death, and legend, and the responsibility that comes with holding these stories in both his mind and his melodies. Romantic relationships in this period of his life are complex. Sami struggles to balance intimacy with the weight of history he carries. Partners are often drawn to his passion and depth, but many cannot fully comprehend the shadows in which his art is rooted. Sami learns to compartmentalize, to love deeply while also understanding that his primary loyalty remains to the legacy of the night in Mississippi, to the students who rely on him, and to the music that sustains and protects all these connections. Through these trials, Sami develops a nuanced understanding of human relationships, patience, and the balance between presence and responsibility. Over time, Sami's performances grow more experimental, blending traditional blues with elements inspired by the stories and spirits he channels. His music evolves to carry multiple layers, a historical narrative, personal catharsis, and the spiritual resonance of those who were lost. Audiences respond intuitively, even when they cannot articulate why the music feels so profound. Critics note the depth, authenticity, and emotional complexity. But those closest to Sami understand it is not performance alone that drives him, it is obligation, memory, and the need to honor lives that were sacrificed for moments of joy and freedom. Sami also navigates the music industry's pressures and exploitation. Understanding that commercial success may conflict with artistic integrity, he carefully selects venues, collaborators, and projects that align with his mission, preserving the stories and cultural memory of the South, the juke joint, and the night of violence in music. Through recordings and live performances, he ensures that these narratives reach a wider audience, without diluting their truth or emotional resonance. In doing so, Sami becomes a custodian of history, blending the personal, the cultural, and the supernatural into a cohesive and enduring body of work. As he matures, Sami begins to reflect on mortality, both his own and the legacy of others. He visits Clarksdale less frequently, but maintains strong ties to the town through correspondence, music, and the students he trains. He recognizes that his mission is not only to survive, but to transmit knowledge, emotion, and experience. Each recording, lesson, and performance becomes a lifeline connecting the living with the departed, ensuring that their stories endure, even as the original witnesses age or pass. Sami's fame spreads across the United States and abroad. drawing musicians, scholars, and enthusiasts who wish to understand the depth of his craft. Through this work, Sammy imparts lessons about survival, artistic integrity, and the ethical responsibilities of those who carry historical narratives. He emphasizes the importance of honoring the past while innovating, and of blending personal expression with communal memory. Through these years, Sammy witnesses societal shifts, the Harlem Renaissance's aftermath, the Great Depression's impacts, and the slow, painful march of civil rights progress. His music adapts, responding to new social climates while remaining anchored in the original blues of Clarksdale. Each era brings fresh challenges, fresh audiences, and fresh interpretations of the same themes of survival, resistance, and cultural preservation. Sammy becomes a symbol not only of musical excellence, but of historical continuity, an embodiment of the resilience of a people and a culture shaped by suffering, creativity, and persistence. Sammy begins to organize annual gatherings of musicians and storytellers in Chicago, creating a living archive of the blues. The events are marked by performances, oral histories, and communal remembrance. These gatherings become legendary, blending education, entertainment, and reverence for the past. The rituals ensure that the stories of Clarksdale and the juke joint are not just remembered, but experienced by new generations who might otherwise never grasp the gravity of that night. Sammy also begins documenting his experiences in writing notes, reflections, and memoirs that parallel his music. These written accounts serve both as a personal catharsis and as an educational resource for future historians and musicians. He writes about the juke joint, the Mississippi Delta, the night of horror and triumph, the supernatural forces encountered, and the moral and ethical lessons learned along the way. Together, these documents, recordings, and teachings form a comprehensive archive of experience, culture, and survival. Sammy's life, now firmly entwined with the rhythm of Chicago, expands into unexpected intersections of culture, politics, and personal reflection. The blues, once a secret language of survival in the Mississippi Delta, now becomes a conduit through which generations can understand pain, resilience, and community. Every note, every chord, carries the echoes of Smoke and Stack, of Annie and Pearline, and the juke joint that birthed his purpose. While Sammy performs across the city, he continues nurturing his students. Many come from disadvantaged neighborhoods drawn by his reputation, but also by the promise of learning something more than music, learning to live with integrity, to honor the past while forging a future, and to understand that every choice leaves an imprint on the collective memory of their communities. Sammy is patient, yet firm, blending rigorous technical instruction with lessons about human empathy, courage, and history. The Chicago scene itself evolves, influenced by migration, industry, and shifting social structures. Sammy witnesses a melding of musical traditions, jazz, gospel, and blues intertwined with new forms, reflecting the city's complexity. He navigates these shifts carefully, collaborating selectively with artists who respect the roots of the music, while pushing boundaries. In these collaborations, he encourages improvisation grounded in historical awareness, blending innovation with reverence for the stories embedded in each note. As Sammy ages, he confronts mortality more consciously. These encounters no longer terrify him. They guide him. He draws strength from their presence, interpreting the messages and lessons hidden within their appearances, and that the power of music can summon memory, spirit, and emotion in equal measure. Amidst the success and mentorship, Sammy also faces personal trials. The weight of responsibility sometimes isolates him from intimate relationships, as partners struggle to reconcile their desire for normalcy with the depth of history and grief he carries. Sammy learns to navigate these tensions, understanding that his calling may demand sacrifice. He cherishes moments of human connection, but never allows them to overshadow his primary mission, preserving the legacy of the Mississippi Night and the lessons it contains. Sammy's fame attracts attention beyond music circles. Scholars, journalists, and historians seek him out, drawn to the authenticity and gravity of his experiences. He engages with these inquiries thoughtfully, offering insight without allowing commercialization or distortion to dilute the truth. In interviews and lectures, he emphasizes that blues is inseparable from its social, political, and spiritual context. It is a chronicle of struggle and survival, not a product to be packaged for mass consumption. Through these interactions, Sammy begins to influence broader cultural understanding, ensuring that the stories of Clarksdale and its people reach far beyond their original community. Occasionally, remnants of the supernatural nights in Mississippi disrupt this carefully constructed life. Strange occurrences and inexplainable shadows, fleeting sounds, or subtle sensations surface during performances or quiet reflection. Sammy treats these with ritual and respect, integrating them into his art. He understands that these phenomena are echoes of events that shaped not just his life, but the collective memory of a people, and he honors their presence without allowing fear to dominate. Sammy's archive of recordings, manuscripts, and oral histories expands steadily. He begins curating an informal museum in Chicago, collecting artifacts, letters, instruments, and photographs from the Mississippi Delta. The collection becomes a resource for students, scholars, and musicians alike, a tangible repository of the culture, pain, and joy that fueled the original blues. Through this effort, Sammy ensures that the lessons of the past are preserved, accessible to anyone willing to engage with the depth and complexity of the human experience captured in music. Sammy's performances begin to draw attention internationally. European audiences, particularly in Paris, London, and Berlin, respond with awe to the authenticity and emotional resonance of his blues. His work is featured in academic symposia, radio broadcasts, and cultural exhibitions, positioning him as both a musician and a historian of lived experience. While the international attention gratifies him, Sammy remains focused on the communities that shaped him, traveling back to Clarksdale when possible, and investing time in students who may one day carry the stories to new generations. Relationships within his own family evolve. Sammy maintains contact with distant cousins, nieces, and nephews, sharing lessons and stories of the Mississippi Night. He becomes a repository of family history, preserving not just music but the narratives of ancestors and the ethical and cultural principles they embodied. This familial connection reinforces his sense of purpose, grounding his work in tangible human relationships even as he navigates the abstractions of fame and influence. Through decades of performance, mentorship, and cultural stewardship, Sammy begins experimenting with blending traditional blues with subtle storytelling elements. Each song carries multiple layers: technical mastery, emotional catharsis, historical reflection, and ethical contemplation. Audience members often respond intuitively, sensing the depth without always understanding the historical or personal context. Sammy considers this an indication of success. The music resonates on a level that transcends words, capturing the essence of the night that shaped his life. Challenges continue to emerge. Competition, societal pressures, and personal health crises test Sammy's resilience. Yet he meets these challenges with a combination of pragmatism, learned instinct, and spiritual grounding. The lessons of Smoke and Stack, of Annie and Pearline, guide him, providing wisdom that cannot be gained from experience alone. Sammy's life becomes a careful balance of performance, mentorship, personal reflection, and cultural preservation, each aspect reinforcing the others. Sammy's Chicago gatherings grow in prominence, attracting not just musicians but historians, cultural leaders, and international observers. Workshops, lectures, and live performances intertwine, creating immersive experiences that educate and inspire. The narrative of Clarksdale, of the Mississippi Night, and of the Juke Joint is presented not as legend or myth, but as lived reality, reinforcing the connection between history, music, and community. As Sammy approaches the later decades of his life, he reflects on his legacy. He considers the students he has trained, the recordings he has made, the performances he has given, and the communities he has influenced. He sees that his work has created a living network of memory, culture, and artistic integrity. The story of the Mississippi Night's a horror. The music, the supernatural, the triumph is no longer contained in a single moment or location. It lives through him, through his students, through the audience, and through every note and story he transmits. Sammy's approach to music deepens further. He incorporates subtle elements of rhythm, harmony, and tonality inspired by the spirits of the Mississippi Night. Listeners often describe an ineffable quality to these performances, an emotional resonance that cannot be replicated or explained, but which carries the weight of history and memory. Sammy understands that this is not mere artistry, it is preservation, communion, and cultural stewardship. Sammy also begins to document oral histories from other surviving individuals connected to the Mississippi Juke Joints. Collecting their experiences, fears, and joys, he creates a mosaic of stories that complement his musical archive. These narratives serve both as inspiration for future generations and as a resource for scholars, ensuring that the cultural and social realities of the Jim Crow South are remembered authentically, without distortion or romanticization. The city of Chicago continues to pulse with life, and Sammy finds himself increasingly aware of the responsibility carried by his music. Every night, As he steps onto the stage of his small but revered club, he senses the echoes of the Mississippi Delta smoke. Stack, Annie, Pearline, and the countless souls who had shaped his journey. These ghosts are no longer frightening, but rather guardians of memory and culture, reminding him that his blues is not just entertainment, it is history, it is survival, and it is testimony. As word spreads, Sammy is invited to perform at larger venues and festivals, bringing the authenticity of the Delta to audiences who have only known blues through recordings or legend. Each performance becomes a carefully curated experience, blending storytelling, historical context, and technical mastery. He begins to narrate the stories behind the songs, speaking of the struggles of Black communities in Mississippi, the supernatural night that transformed his life, and the lessons imparted by his family and mentors. Audiences are captivated not only by the music, but by the weight of the history it carries. Understanding that every note is a bridge to a world many have forgotten, Sammy's mentorship expands further. He establishes a formal music school, combining classical blues training with historical and cultural education. Students come from diverse backgrounds, drawn by the promise of learning from a man who embodies the lived history of the genre. He teaches them not only how to play, but why to play, emphasizing the spiritual, emotional, and cultural dimensions of the music. Some students exhibit exceptional talent, others learn more slowly, but Sammy treats each one with patience and care, knowing that the lessons extend beyond music into life itself. During these years, Sammy faces personal challenges. His health occasionally falters, and the weight of carrying history can be exhausting. He reflects often on the choices of Smoke and Stack, considering how their courage, sacrifice, and mistakes shaped his understanding of responsibility. Late at night, he sometimes dreams of the Mississippi juke joint, reliving moments of loss, horror, and joy. These dreams guide him in subtle ways, reminding him that he is not merely preserving a tradition, but living within it. Political and social change sweeps through Chicago, and Sammy's role as a cultural guardian becomes more pronounced. He uses his platform to advocate for social justice, tying the struggles of the present to those of the past. Through music, speeches, and community engagement, he helps others understand the enduring impact of systemic oppression and the power of art as resistance. His performances begin to carry dual meanings: entertainment and education, pleasure and instruction, memory and activism. Despite the growing recognition, Sammy remains rooted in humility. He frequently visits Clarksdale, returning to the land and communities that gave him his foundation. He reconnects with surviving family members, old friends, and the landscapes that inspired his earliest music. These visits are both restorative and grounding, reminding him of the real-world roots of his art and the human stories that fuel the cultural legacy he now carries. Sammy begins recording his own compositions, blending the traditional Delta blues with improvisational styles that reflect his personal journey and the evolution of the genre. These recordings are meticulous, capturing every nuance and subtle emotion. He approaches them as both artistic works and historical documents, preserving not only sound but the intent, emotion, and cultural resonance behind every note. Scholars, critics, and enthusiasts recognize the recordings as milestones, essential references for understanding the true depth and power of blues music. Interactions with fellow musicians deepen Sammy's understanding of collaboration and legacy. He hosts workshops and informal jam sessions, encouraging dialogue between generations and across styles. Younger musicians bring innovation, while Sammy provides historical context and technical guidance. These collaborations result in unique blends of sound, demonstrating that tradition and innovation can coexist without compromising authenticity. Sammy observes, encourages, and participates, careful to honor the balance between influence and originality. The supernatural elements that shaped Sammy's life continue to surface occasionally. Shadows in performance halls, fleeting sensations of touch, or whispers of the past remind him that the Mississippi night is never entirely gone. Sammy incorporates these experiences into his music subtly, using them to enhance emotion and resonance rather than fear. He understands that the spirits of Smoke, Stack, Annie, and Pearline are part of the fabric of his art, guiding him to honor history while embracing the present. As Sammy ages, the weight of his accumulated experiences grows, but so does his influence. Students and protégés begin to emerge as capable musicians and educators, carrying the lessons forward into their own communities. Sammy carefully documents their progress, mentoring them to not just perform, but also understand the responsibility of preserving culture, confronting history, and telling the truth of human experience through music. In the quieter moments of reflection, Sammy writes memoirs and compiles histories of the Mississippi Night. These texts, often interwoven with musical notation, oral histories, and personal insights, become valuable resources for both academic and musical communities. They preserve the narratives of those who came before, ensuring that the struggles, triumphs, and supernatural events of Clarksdale remain accessible and instructive for generations to come. Sammy's network of influence continues to grow internationally. Musicians and scholars from Europe, Africa, and Asia seek him out, recognizing the depth of knowledge he possesses. He welcomes these interactions, sharing techniques, cultural context, and historical narrative, fostering a global appreciation of the Delta blues. He carefully balances his time between performing, mentoring, and documenting, understanding that each task contributes to the enduring life of the music and its stories. In the final decades of his life, Sammy reflects on mortality with a nuanced understanding. He knows that he cannot escape the inevitability of death, but he finds solace in the enduring impact of his work. Every student trained, every recording made, every performance shared contributes to a cultural legacy that transcends his physical presence. Through this understanding, Sammy achieves a sense of peace, knowing that the Mississippi Night, the juke joint, and the lessons of Smoke, Stack, and Annie live on through the communities, music, and memory he has cultivated. Sammy occasionally receives unexpected visitors, aged spirits, or inexplicable presences that remind him of the supernatural events of his youth. He treats these appearances with respect, sometimes responding through improvisational music or ritual gestures, acknowledging that the line between past and present is fluid. These moments reinforce the enduring relationship between memory, culture, and spirit, reminding Sammy that his work bridges worlds, both temporal and eternal. The 1960s sweep through America with vibrant change and unrest, and Sammy's Chicago Blues Club has become more than a venue. It is a cultural landmark, a meeting place for those seeking connection through music, and a sanctuary from the social upheaval outside its doors. Civil rights movements surge, and Sammy, now recognized not just as a musician, but as a community leader, feels the weight of responsibility intensify. He understands that the music he plays carries more than entertainment. It carries the history of oppression, survival, and triumph of Black Americans. And with every note, he communicates resilience, sorrow, and hope. During these years, Sammy establishes relationships with prominent civil rights activists, using his club as a discreet space for organizing, discussion, and cultural expression. Music intertwines with activism. Performers and audiences alike channel emotion into harmony, blues, and improvisation, creating an undercurrent of resistance against systemic injustice. Sammy often integrates spoken word introductions, recounting the origins of each song, its connection to the Mississippi Delta, and the human stories embedded within. Patrons come not only for music, but for insight, enlightenment, and empowerment, understanding that culture and activism are inseparable. Sammy also begins a series of collaborative projects with other musicians, bridging genres and geographies. He brings jazz, soul, and even early rock influences into his performances, maintaining the integrity of Delta blues while embracing innovation. These collaborations allow him to mentor younger artists in both technique and cultural responsibility, teaching that mastery of one's craft must always be accompanied by respect for history. Among his protégés are musicians who later become influential figures themselves, ensuring that Sammy's approach to music and mentorship multiplies impact across generations. Despite his professional success, Sammy faces personal trials. He mourns the continued absence of his family members from Clarksdale and reflects on the sacrifices of Smoke, Stack, and Annie. Their lessons resonate constantly, reminding him of the costs of survival and the burden of legacy. He also contends with the passing of old friends, mentors, and collaborators, understanding that each loss is a reminder of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of documenting and transmitting culture before it is gone. The supernatural elements of his past occasionally resurface. During a late-night performance, a sudden chill or flickering lights remind Sammy of the Mississippi Night that shaped his destiny. While some might fear these occurrences, he has learned to embrace them as affirmations of connection and invisible audience watching over him, encouraging him to honor the past while engaging the present. These moments influence improvisations, tonal choices, and the emotional layering of performances, adding depth that captivates audiences. Sammy's influence extends into education. He establishes workshops, apprenticeships, and informal schools for aspiring musicians from marginalized communities. ensuring that talent has access to knowledge and opportunity that historical inequities might otherwise deny. He emphasizes storytelling alongside technical skill, insisting that music without understanding its cultural and historical roots is incomplete. These programs thrive, creating networks of musicians, educators, and cultural historians who carry forward the lessons Sami imparts. During this era, the civil rights movement increasingly intersects with artistic expression. Sami uses his platform to advocate for justice, equality, and cultural preservation. His compositions begin to reflect the struggle and hope of the movement, and he collaborates with poets, activists, and other musicians to craft performances that serve as both artistic statements and calls to action. Patrons report that listening to Sami perform is akin to witnessing history itself. Every note resonates with lived experience. Every lyric echoes with the weight of collective memory. Sami also focuses on recording, capturing live performances and studio sessions that blend traditional Delta blues with the contemporary sound of the era. These recordings become touchstones for understanding the evolution of blues music, illustrating how tradition and innovation coexist. He meticulously annotates these works, providing insight into the historical context, musical techniques, and personal anecdotes that inform each performance. Archivists, scholars, and music historians recognize these materials as invaluable cultural documents. Interactions with fellow musicians deepen Sami's understanding of mentorship and legacy. He nurtures collaborations that cross racial and cultural lines, emphasizing that music transcends divisions while maintaining its roots. He ensures that younger musicians grasp the ethical responsibility inherent in storytelling through music, reinforcing the idea that the past informs the present, and that cultural preservation is as crucial as artistic innovation. Outside of the stage, Sami navigates the personal challenges of aging, reflection, and memory. He journals extensively, recounting not just the Mississippi Night but also the decades that followed the growth of Chicago, the lives of his protégés, and the cultural shifts that shaped his work. These journals serve as personal catharsis and as historical records, ensuring that his perspective and experiences are preserved. The supernatural experiences continue to punctuate his life, though less dramatically. He occasionally senses presences during late-night rehearsals, or feels the subtle guidance of past mentors during critical musical decisions. Rather than fear these moments, he incorporates them as inspiration, finding creative solutions, improvising complex passages, and invoking emotions that touch audiences on profound levels. These experiences also remind him of the interconnection between mortality and immortality, the idea that while lives end, influence, memory, and culture endure. Sami's Club remains a hub for cultural preservation and innovation. Patrons and musicians alike recognize it as a sacred space where music carries social, spiritual, and historical weight. The club becomes a beacon, attracting visitors from across the country and internationally, seeking authenticity, inspiration, and guidance. Sami ensures the club maintains integrity, balancing commercial success with a deep respect for heritage and the principles imparted by his mentors. In his personal life, Sami reflects often on the choices of Smoke and Stack. Their sacrifices, courage, and guidance underpin every decision he makes. He honors them through his music, mentorship, and writings, understanding that each action contributes to an enduring legacy that transcends his individual existence. The weight of responsibility is significant, yet Sami embraces it, knowing that he embodies not just his own story, but the stories of countless others who came before him. Sami's philosophy solidifies: music is a vessel of culture, memory, and history, and to play it without understanding its depth is to diminish its power. He ensures that every note performed, every song recorded, and every lesson taught carries this understanding, transmitting both technical skill and the weight of cultural knowledge. Through this approach, Sami establishes a living lineage, intertwining performance, education, and cultural preservation in a manner that will persist for generations. Sami's influence in the music world continues to expand as the 1970s unfold. The civil rights movement has achieved major legislative victories, but the fight for equality and cultural recognition persists. Sami's Chicago Club becomes a hub not only for music but for political dialogue and social awareness. Patrons come seeking both artistic inspiration and a sense of community, where discussions of history, justice, and culture are as central as the blues itself. Sami encourages these conversations, recognizing that music cannot exist in isolation from society. It reflects and shapes the world in which it is created. He mentors a growing number of musicians, many of whom are drawn from marginalized backgrounds. Sammy emphasizes the importance of understanding the Delta roots of blues, while also encouraging experimentation. This period sees the blending of blues with funk, jazz, and early rock, allowing a new generation of musicians to explore creative possibilities while maintaining historical continuity. Sammy guides these musicians with patience and rigor, ensuring they understand the social and historical responsibility embedded in their art. Personal reflection becomes increasingly important to Sammy. The memories of Smoke, Stack, and Annie remain vivid, and he feels the weight of their sacrifices in every performance. He occasionally visits Clarksdale to pay respects at family plots and reconnect with the land that shaped his early life. These trips serve both as pilgrimage and as a reminder of the resilience and courage of those who came before him. They also inspire compositions that draw upon the Mississippi landscape, its history, and its people, creating music that is deeply grounded in place and narrative. Sammy begins collaborating with historians and cultural archivists to document the Delta blues tradition. These collaborations result in interviews, recordings, and analyses that preserve the nuances of performance, lyricism, and historical context. He becomes increasingly aware that his music serves as a bridge between generations, ensuring that the struggles and triumphs of his ancestors remain accessible to future audiences. These efforts are lauded by scholars, educators, and fellow musicians alike, solidifying Sammy's role as both an artist and a cultural custodian. Throughout this period, Sammy navigates the challenges of fame and recognition. The commercial pressures of the music industry occasionally conflict with his artistic and cultural priorities. He resists trends that would compromise the authenticity of his work, choosing instead to focus on projects that honor tradition, innovation, and social responsibility. By maintaining this balance, Sammy cultivates a reputation not just as a musician, but as a principled cultural leader whose influence transcends performance. Supernatural experiences continue subtly to touch his life. During quiet moments in the club, or during late-night rehearsals, Sammy senses the presence of Smoke, Stack, and other ancestors. These moments inspire improvisation and emotional depth in his music, reinforcing the interconnectedness of past, present, and future. The supernatural is not a source of fear, but a reminder of the enduring impact of those who shaped his journey. The late 1970s bring personal challenges as Sammy confronts aging and the evolving landscape of the music industry. New genres and cultural movements emerge, and Sammy must navigate these shifts while preserving the integrity of his musical heritage. He does so by continuing to mentor younger musicians, incorporating new influences in ways that respect the Delta blues tradition. His workshops expand, including formal and informal sessions, and his club remains a place where history, culture, and music converge. Sammy also invests in education outside of music. He supports programs that teach African American history, social justice, and cultural literacy. Recognizing that art alone cannot address systemic inequalities, Sammy uses his platform to facilitate broader understanding, offering his club as a space for lectures, discussions, and performances that highlight historical and contemporary struggles. These efforts enhance the sense of community around his music, fostering a space where cultural preservation and social progress intersect. The narrative of Sammy's life continues to interweave personal, cultural, and historical threads. His legacy is not merely measured by commercial success, but by the depth of mentorship, the richness of cultural documentation, and the lives touched by his music and guidance. Each performance, each workshop, and each recording becomes a thread in a larger tapestry, reflecting the complexity, resilience, and creativity of his community. Despite the challenges, Sammy finds moments of joy and fulfillment. He celebrates milestones with friends, family, and collaborators, sharing stories of the Mississippi Delta, of Smoke, Stack, and Annie, and of the trials and triumphs that have defined his journey. These moments reinforce his commitment to the preservation and evolution of blues music, and ensure that the cultural legacy entrusted to him continues to grow and inspire. Sammy's continued dedication to mentorship and cultural stewardship begins to attract national recognition. He's invited to speak at conferences, participate in cultural panels, and contribute to documentaries chronicling the history of blues music. His first-hand accounts of life in Clarksdale, combined with his extensive musical expertise, make him a vital resource for understanding the intersection of art, history, and society. These engagements reinforce Sammy's dual role as both practitioner and historian, ensuring that his influence extends far beyond the walls of his club. The 1980s bring further evolution. Sammy adapts to new technologies in music production, integrating them into recordings, while maintaining the authenticity of traditional blues. Collaborations with emerging artists continue, creating a dynamic interchange between generations. Sammy also participates in archival projects, ensuring that recordings, photographs, and documents are preserved for future study and appreciation. His careful attention to both performance and documentation ensures that his work remains both artistically compelling and historically invaluable. Through it all, Sammy reflects on the Mississippi night that began his extraordinary journey, the losses, the victories, the supernatural experiences, and the lessons imparted by Smoke, Stack, and Annie, all inform the way he navigates the world. Music remains his compass, guiding him through social change, personal growth, and the complexities of life as an artist and cultural custodian. Sammy's influence in the music world continues to expand as the 1970s unfold. The civil rights movement has achieved major legislative victories, but the fight for equality and cultural recognition persists. Sammy's Chicago Club becomes a hub not only for music, but for political dialogue and social awareness. Patrons come seeking both artistic inspiration and a sense of community, where discussions of history, justice, and culture are as central as the blues itself. Sammy encourages these conversations, recognizing that music cannot exist in isolation from society. It reflects and shapes the world in which it is created. He mentors a growing number of musicians, many of whom are drawn from marginalized backgrounds. Sammy emphasizes the importance of understanding the Delta roots of blues, while also encouraging experimentation. This period sees the blending of blues with funk, jazz, and early rock, allowing a new generation of musicians to explore creative possibilities while maintaining historical continuity. Sammy guides these musicians with patience and rigor, ensuring they understand the social and historical responsibility embedded in their art. Personal reflection becomes increasingly important to Sammy. The memories of Smoke, Stack, and Annie remain vivid, and he feels the weight of their sacrifices in every performance. He occasionally visits Clarksdale to pay respects at family plots and reconnect with the land that shaped his early life. These trips serve both as pilgrimage and as a reminder of the resilience and courage of those who came before him. They also inspire compositions that draw upon the Mississippi landscape, its history, and its people, creating music that is deeply grounded in place and narrative. Sammy begins collaborating with historians and cultural archivists to document the Delta blues tradition. These collaborations result in interviews, recordings, and analyses that preserve the nuances of performance, lyricism, and historical context. He becomes increasingly aware that his music serves as a bridge between generations, ensuring that the struggles and triumphs of his ancestors remain accessible to future audiences. These efforts are lauded by scholars, educators, and fellow musicians alike, solidifying Sammy's role as both an artist and a cultural custodian. Throughout this period, Sammy navigates the challenges of fame and recognition. The commercial pressures of the music industry occasionally conflict with his artistic and cultural priorities. He resists trends that would compromise the authenticity of his work, choosing instead to focus on projects that honor tradition, innovation, and social responsibility. By maintaining this balance, Sammy cultivates a reputation not just as a musician, but as a principled cultural leader whose influence transcends performance. Supernatural experiences continue subtly to touch his life. During quiet moments in the club, or during late-night rehearsals, Sammy senses the presence of Smoke, Stack, and other ancestors. These moments inspire improvisation and emotional depth in his music, reinforcing the interconnectedness of past, present, and future. The supernatural is not a source of fear, but a reminder of the enduring impact of those who shaped his journey. The late 1970s bring personal challenges as Sammy confronts aging and the evolving landscape of the music industry. New genres and cultural movements emerge, and Sammy must navigate these shifts while preserving the integrity of his musical heritage. He does so by continuing to mentor younger musicians, incorporating new influences in ways that respect the Delta blues tradition. His workshops expand, including formal and informal sessions, and his club remains a place where history, culture, and music converge. Sammy also invests in education outside of music. He supports programs that teach African American history, social justice, and cultural literacy. Recognizing that art alone cannot address systemic inequalities, Sammy uses his platform to facilitate broader understanding, offering his club as a space for lectures, discussions, and performances that highlight historical and contemporary struggles. These efforts enhance the sense of community around his music, fostering a space where cultural preservation and social progress intersect. The narrative of Sammy's life continues to interweave personal, cultural, and historical threads. His legacy is not merely measured by commercial success, but by the depth of mentorship, the richness of cultural documentation, and the lives touched by his music and guidance. Each performance, each workshop, and each recording becomes a thread in a larger tapestry, reflecting the complexity, resilience, and creativity of his community. Despite the challenges, Sammy finds moments of joy and fulfillment. He celebrates milestones with friends, family, and collaborators, sharing stories of the Mississippi Delta, of Smoke, Stack, and Annie, and of the trials and triumphs that have defined his journey. These moments reinforce his commitment to the preservation and evolution of blues music, and ensure that the cultural legacy entrusted to him continues to grow and inspire. Sammy's continued dedication to mentorship and cultural stewardship begins to attract national recognition. He's invited to speak at conferences, participate in cultural panels, and contribute to documentaries chronicling the history of blues music. His first-hand accounts of life in Clarksdale, combined with his extensive musical expertise, make him a vital resource for understanding the intersection of art, history, and society. These engagements reinforce Sammy's dual role as both practitioner and historian, ensuring that his influence extends far beyond the walls of his club. The 1980s bring further evolution. Sammy adapts to new technologies in music production, integrating them into recordings, while maintaining the authenticity of traditional blues. Collaborations with emerging artists continue, creating a dynamic interchange between generations. Sammy also participates in archival projects, ensuring that recordings, photographs, and documents are preserved for future study and appreciation. His careful attention to both performance and documentation ensures that his work remains both artistically compelling and historically invaluable. Through it all, Sammy reflects on the Mississippi night that began his extraordinary journey, the losses, the victories, the supernatural experiences, and the lessons imparted by Smoke, Stack, and Annie, all inform the way he navigates the world. Music remains his compass, guiding him through social change, personal growth, and the complexities of life as an artist and cultural custodian. Sammy Moore, now a revered figure in the blues community, begins to face new challenges as the 1990s progress. The cultural landscape shifts with the rise of digital music, and younger audiences become more connected to pop, hip-hop, and electronic influences. While his Chicago club remains a sanctuary for blues aficionados, Sammy recognizes the need to reach new listeners. He experiments with recordings that combine traditional Delta blues with subtle modern production techniques, carefully maintaining the authenticity of his sound while enhancing accessibility for a broader audience. Amid this evolution, Sammy becomes increasingly conscious of the personal legacies that shaped him. He dedicates time to storytelling sessions with students and apprentices, recounting lessons learned from his cousins Smoke and Stack, the supernatural events of Clarksdale, and the community's resilience under systemic oppression. Though the most traumatic episodes are shared sparingly, the moral and emotional truths within these stories inspire young musicians to approach blues with reverence and creativity. Sammy also becomes a bridge between generations of musicians. He collaborates with aging blues legends, recording sessions that document their techniques and narratives, while simultaneously mentoring emerging talent. These collaborations create a multi-generational dialogue, strengthening the sense of continuity within the blues tradition. His efforts are recognized in both academic and artistic circles, earning him invitations to lecture at universities and participate in panel discussions on cultural preservation and music history. Internationally, Sammy's reputation grows, leading to tours in Europe, Asia, and Africa. These tours expose him to diverse musical traditions, which subtly influence his compositions. While the core of his music remains deeply rooted in the Delta experience, he begins incorporating modal scales and rhythms inspired by other cultures, creating a hybrid sound that resonates across borders. Each performance is carefully curated, blending narrative, music, and historical context, transforming concerts into immersive cultural experiences. The impact of the supernatural events from his youth continues to echo through Sammy's work. Though he has never revealed the full truth of what occurred in Clarksdale, these experiences inform the emotional depth and intensity of his performances. Audiences sense the authenticity and passion behind his music, often describing his performances as transcendent or otherworldly. This intangible quality becomes a hallmark of his artistic identity, setting him apart in a crowded musical landscape. In his personal life, Sammy maintains a close connection to family and his roots. Regular visits to Clarksdale allow him to honor his heritage and stay connected to the land, the people, and the traditions that shaped him. He becomes a mentor not only to musicians, but to community members seeking to preserve and celebrate the cultural history of the Delta region. Through community initiatives, educational programs, and archival projects, Sammy ensures that the struggles, triumphs, and creativity of his ancestors are not forgotten. Sammy's journey in this period is also marked by reflection and reconciliation. Encounters with figures from his past, including ageless Stack and Mary, prompt him to consider the broader meaning of immortality, legacy, and artistic purpose. He understands that the true measure of his life is not only in his personal achievements but in the enduring influence he has on those who follow. Sammy's influence on the blues and wider music scene continues to expand as the late 1990s and early 2000s unfold. By now, he has firmly established himself as both a guardian of tradition and a forward-thinking innovator. His Chicago club becomes a pilgrimage site for blues enthusiasts, young musicians, and scholars alike, and its walls are adorned with photographs, memorabilia, and instruments that tell the story of Delta blues' rich history. During this period, Sammy begins to focus on recording a comprehensive anthology of his life's work. The project, which he titles Echoes of the Delta, is intended to capture the raw essence of his early experiences in Mississippi, the lessons learned from his family, and the supernatural forces that shaped his adolescence. He collaborates with longtime allies, as well as emerging talent, meticulously layering live recordings with field recordings from Clark's, including the natural ambience of the Delta sounds from juke joints, and subtle musical improvisations, inspired by the spirits he once summoned through performance. As Sammy tours globally, he becomes increasingly aware of the ways music transcends cultural and linguistic boundaries. In Europe, audiences are fascinated by the historical context of Delta blues, while in Japan and South Korea, young fans connect emotionally to the sorrow, joy, and resilience embedded in his compositions. These experiences reaffirm Sammy's belief that music is both a vessel for storytelling and a tool for fostering empathy and understanding across generations and continents. Sammy's mentorship deepens during this era. He hosts workshops, masterclasses, and informal sessions for aspiring musicians, sharing not only technical skills, but also the cultural and spiritual dimensions of blues music. He emphasizes the importance of narrative, teaching students that every note carries history, and that every performance is an opportunity to honor those who came before. Through these interactions, Sammy ensures that the Delta blues tradition evolves without losing its authenticity, blending innovation with reverence for the past. Despite his professional success, Sammy remains deeply connected to his family and the legacy of Smoke and Stack. He regularly revisits Clarksdale to perform at community events, pay homage to the ancestors, and reflect on the enduring significance of the night that shaped him. The memory of the supernatural confrontation with Remick and the vampires, while never fully shared with the public, continues to inform his artistic sensibilities, lending a profound emotional depth to his performances. Sammy also becomes involved in initiatives to preserve the history of African American music in the South. He collaborates with museums, cultural organizations, and academic institutions to curate exhibits, document oral histories, and provide educational programs for young people. These efforts are driven by a sense of responsibility to safeguard the cultural heritage that nurtured his own development, ensuring that future generations can learn from and be inspired by the resilience and creativity of the Delta community. Throughout this period, Sammy's personal life is marked by introspection and reconciliation. He maintains close ties with Mary and Stack, who continue to serve as reminders of both the supernatural and human dimensions of his formative experiences. These relationships, layered with the memories of Smoke and the struggles of the community, continually shape the themes and emotional core of Sammy's music. Sammy's international tours grow in scale and significance as the early 2010s approach. By now, he is not only recognized as a master of the blues, but also as a historian and storyteller whose performances bridge time, culture, and geography. Each concert is carefully curated, combining music, narrative, and visuals that evoke the Mississippi Delta, the struggles of his ancestors, and the resilience that has defined his journey. Audiences across continents are captivated not only by his technical skill, but by the stories embedded in every chord and lyric, which convey both hardship and hope. During this period, Sammy establishes a foundation dedicated to preserving Delta blues and supporting young, emerging musicians. The Moore Legacy Foundation provides grants for scholarships, instruments, and educational programs, particularly for those from underrepresented communities. Sammy mentors young artists, emphasizing that music is not simply performance, it is a living archive of history, emotion, and culture. He instills in them the understanding that every note played carries the weight of stories, struggles, and triumphs of generations past. In Chicago, Sammy opens a new venue that functions as both a club and a cultural hub. Named Smoke and Stack Hall, it honors his late father and uncle, offering a space for live performances, educational workshops, and historical exhibitions. The hall quickly becomes a landmark, attracting musicians, scholars, and fans who seek to experience the authenticity of Delta blues. The atmosphere reflects the duality of his life, one foot in the supernatural and tragic events of his youth, the other in the joyful and communal aspects of music and culture. Sammy's personal relationships remain central to his life and art. Stack, now more reflective and philosophical, occasionally joins him for special performances, offering insights that blend wisdom with the haunting legacy of their shared past. Mary, having embraced a path of quiet resilience, visits intermittently, providing emotional grounding and reminding Sammy of the human costs behind every historical and musical narrative. Their interactions deepen his understanding of forgiveness, memory, and the complex interplay between human and supernatural influences that shaped his youth. As he matures, Sammy begins to explore collaborations with artists across genres, integrating blues with jazz, soul, and modern interpretations of roots music. These collaborations expand the reach of Delta blues, making it accessible to younger generations while preserving its essence. Sammy is deliberate in maintaining the balance between innovation and tradition, ensuring that while the music evolves, it never loses the core elements that give it historical and emotional authenticity. The stories of Smoke and Stack, the supernatural confrontations of their past, and the resilience of the Mississippi Delta continue to influence Sammy's creative process. While the public may only perceive the music's surface beauty, Sammy infuses each composition with subtle narratives of survival, resistance, and community. Through this approach, he achieves a rare synthesis of art, history, and memory, transforming performances into immersive experiences that educate, inspire, and preserve cultural identity. Sammy's influence in Chicago grows steadily, his music becoming a touchstone for a community, navigating the challenges of migration, racism, and economic struggle. Each performance carries a dual purpose: to entertain and to educate, embedding the story of Mississippi and the Night of the Juke Joint into the consciousness of his audience. Patrons feel a gravity in his playing, the kind that comes from living through events that cannot be erased. His blues carries the weight of survival, the sorrow of loss, and the defiant celebration of life against all odds. He begins collaborating with fellow musicians who have their own stories of hardship and resilience. Together, they form ensembles that experiment with traditional blues, integrating elements of jazz, gospel, and the folk music of the South. Sammy encourages them to not only play notes, but to convey emotion, to tell stories, and to pass on history through sound. This new generation of musicians looks to him as both mentor and guardian of a tradition that has roots in suffering, but blooms into art. Sammy also explores recording techniques more deeply, understanding that capturing the subtleties of performance on vinyl and tape is crucial for posterity. Each session is deliberate, balancing technical precision with the raw spontaneity that keeps the music alive. The stories of Smoke, Stack, Annie, and the others are woven into the arrangements, ensuring that the echoes of that night remain tangible for future listeners. Each record becomes both artifact and message, a permanent testament to the resilience and creativity of those who lived and died in Clarksdale. Despite his growing influence, Sammy wrestles privately with guilt and unresolved grief. He dreams frequently of Smoke and Stack, of the burning juke joint, and the faces of those who never escaped. These dreams are vivid, sometimes violent, and often leave him shaken upon waking. Yet, he channels the intensity into his performances, allowing audiences to feel the depth of emotion embedded in each chord and lyric. Music becomes his language of healing, both personal and communal, and through it, he finds a measure of peace. The Chicago blues scene itself becomes a character in Sammy's ongoing journey. The city is vibrant but fraught with danger, racial tensions, economic inequality, and criminal elements challenge his ability to maintain the integrity of his work and protect those around him. Sammy navigates these dynamics with the wisdom gained from Mississippi, balancing ambition with caution, collaboration with vigilance. Friendships are tested, alliances forged and broken, and each decision carries consequences that echo through his life and the lives of his students. Sammy also begins to mentor young women musicians, emphasizing the importance of preserving their voices in a historically male-dominated field. He teaches them not just musical techniques, but storytelling, stage presence, and the resilience required to survive as artists in a city full of opportunities and obstacles. These protégés carry forward lessons of empathy, history, and technical skill, ensuring that the blues evolves while staying rooted in the experiences that gave it birth. Throughout this period, Sammy occasionally returns to Clarksdale. He visits the ruins of the juke joint, speaks with survivors, and listens to stories passed down from others who were present that night. These pilgrimages are solemn but necessary, allowing him to reconcile personal trauma with communal history. Each visit strengthens his understanding of the night's impact, helping him translate grief into music and memory into mentorship. Sammy's personal life continues to grow in complexity. Relationships are fleeting, and love is shadowed by the weight of his past. Yet he finds moments of joy and connection, building a chosen family of fellow musicians, friends, and protégés. These bonds are carefully nurtured, understood as essential to both personal survival and the preservation of collective memory. Trust is never assumed but earned, and each relationship becomes a lesson in balance, responsibility, and the human capacity for resilience. As Sammy ages, his performances gain additional layers of meaning. Younger audiences sense the history in his music, even if they do not know the specifics. Older patrons recognize the echoes of shared experiences. In clubs, recording studios, and community spaces, Sammy's presence bridges generations. Each note played is a dialogue with the past, each song a vessel carrying fragments of lives lost and moments survived. He learns to inhabit the dual roles of artist and historian, blending personal memory with communal responsibility. Sammy also witnesses broader cultural shifts. The civil rights movement gains momentum, and Chicago becomes a hub for social and political activism. Music is not merely entertainment but a rallying cry, a medium for protest, and a tool for cultural cohesion. Sammy participates selectively, using his music to amplify messages of resilience and justice, while remaining true to the blues tradition that shaped him. He mentors his students to understand the power of music beyond the stage, as a force that can educate, inspire, and sustain communities. Despite decades of success, the memories of Mississippi and the night of the juke joint remain vivid. Sammy occasionally senses the lingering supernatural presence that haunted that fateful night. Subtle but undeniable, whether real or psychological, these echoes reinforce the sacredness of his work, reminding him that he is not simply preserving music, but the spirit of a history that cannot be forgotten. He channels these experiences into teaching, performance, and recording, ensuring that the lessons embedded in the past remain alive for future generations. Through mentorship, collaboration, and relentless practice, Sammy becomes a linchpin in Chicago's cultural landscape. His influence spreads beyond local venues, impacting festivals, recording studios, and musical archives. Students of his students carry the legacy forward, embedding the blues with a consciousness of history, survival, and artistic integrity. In each note, story, and lesson, the echoes of Smoke, Stack, Annie, and the juke joint persist, transformed but never lost. Even in his later years, Sammy continues to perform with vigor and purpose. His music serves as both tribute and testimony, a bridge connecting past horrors to present resilience. Each audience becomes part of a ritual of remembrance, each performance a reaffirmation that survival, memory, and art are inseparable. The blues is no longer simply a genre, it is a lifeline, a cultural archive, and a means to confront both personal and collective trauma. Sammy's life, in its entirety, demonstrates the enduring power of music to carry history, connect generations, and preserve memory. He transforms personal grief into communal understanding, ensuring that the sacrifices, courage, and creativity of those lost are never forgotten. Through his mentorship, recordings, and performances, Sammy cements a legacy that stretches far beyond his own life, touching countless individuals who may never fully know the story behind the music, but feel its resonance nonetheless. Sammy's influence spreads beyond Chicago, reaching the growing urban centers of the North, where the Great Migration has brought thousands of Southern Black families seeking new lives and opportunities. His reputation as a bluesman who carries the weight of history precedes him, and he is invited to perform at venues that recognize not only his skill, but the stories embedded in each note he plays. For Sammy, these tours are more than professional obligations, they are pilgrimages, opportunities to carry Mississippi, Clarksdale, and the night of the juke joint into new communities, ensuring the memory of what was lost remains alive. As he performs in different cities, Sammy encounters other musicians who survive traumas of their own. Some physical, some emotional, and some of a more inexplicable, almost supernatural nature. These encounters create a network of artists who understand that music is a vessel for both joy and suffering, and that the blues is a language of endurance. Sammy listens, teaches, and learns from them, recognizing that each story, each struggle, adds new depth to the songs he carries forward. The collaborations are improvisational, echoing the dynamic nature of life itself, where grief, hope, and resilience coexist in every measure. Sammy continues to mentor younger generations, teaching them not only technical skill, but also the philosophy of the blues, that music is a living archive, a repository for memory, emotion, and history. He emphasizes the importance of context, encouraging students to understand the conditions under which the songs were born, the people who inspired them, and the realities they reflect. By instilling this understanding, Sammy ensures that each performance is not merely entertainment, but an act of preservation, a testament to the lives and sacrifices of those who came before. Meanwhile, Sammy maintains connections with Clarksdale, returning periodically to visit survivors and trace the remnants of the juke joint. The town has changed, shaped by time and progress, yet the echoes of that night remain in whispered stories, in the cautious glances of elders, and in the rhythms that permeate everyday life. Sammy speaks with descendants of those who were present, gathering fragments of memory, reconciling conflicting accounts, and piecing together a more complete narrative. These pilgrimages are personal and ritualistic, grounding him in the reality that while time moves forward, the past continues to shape the present. In his personal life, Sammy experiences both love and loss. Relationships are often fleeting, overshadowed by the pull of duty and the weight of memory. Yet he forms deep bonds with trusted peers and protégés, cultivating a chosen family that mirrors, in part, the one he lost in Clarksdale. These connections provide solace, laughter, and occasional reprieve from the intensity of his work, reminding him that survival and joy can coexist, even in a life defined by trauma. Sammy's music begins to reach recording studios with increasing frequency. The recordings are meticulous, capturing not only the technical mastery of his performances, but also the emotional resonance that defines them. Each record becomes an artifact, preserving the echoes of Clarksdale, the night of the juke joint, and the lives of Smoke, Stack, Annie, and others. Through these recordings, Sammy ensures that even those who have never visited Mississippi, even those born decades later, can experience the depth of history embedded in the blues. During these years, Sammy occasionally confronts the supernatural undertones that marked his youth. He senses residual presences, echoes of the night's horrors that linger faintly in certain rooms, or in the silence between notes. While he never fully understands their nature, he respects their existence and incorporates the awareness into his music. The tension between the natural and supernatural becomes part of his artistry, lending an otherworldly quality to his performances that captivates audiences and deepens the impact of the stories he tells. Sammy's teaching expands as he mentors both established and emerging artists. He encourages experimentation within the blues, blending traditional forms with innovative approaches, while maintaining fidelity to the core emotional truths. Through mentorship, Sammy creates a ripple effect, ensuring that the essence of Clarksdale's juke joint reaches far beyond his personal reach. Students carried the lessons forward, some achieving fame, others cultivating local traditions, but all contributing to a cultural lineage rooted in resilience, memory, and expression. The Chicago community comes to recognize Sammy not only as a performer, but as a cultural historian. His insights into the social, economic, and racial dynamics of Mississippi and the migration north are valued by scholars, fellow musicians, and audiences alike. Through public talks, intimate gatherings, and private lessons, Sammy shares the narrative of survival embedded in the blues, emphasizing that every note, every chord, and every lyric is a conduit for history, identity, and truth. Despite decades of success, the memories of the night in Clarksdale remained vivid and personal. Sammy occasionally dreams of Smoke and Stack, of Annie and other lost figures, their faces as clear as ever. These visions are bittersweet, reminders of both love and loss, courage and vulnerability. Sammy channels these emotions into his music, transforming grief into art and memory into teaching. Each performance becomes a bridge between the living and the departed, between history and the present, carrying forward the essence of those who can no longer tell their own stories. Sammy also navigates the evolving musical landscape. Jazz, gospel, and emerging genres influence his work, But he remains committed to the integrity of the blues as a vessel for storytelling and history. He experiments with arrangements, instrumentation, and lyrical content, always with an eye toward honoring the past while engaging contemporary audiences. His work becomes a model for balancing tradition and innovation, ensuring that the blues evolves without losing its roots in lived experience and historical truth. As his life progresses, Sammy becomes a symbol of endurance and cultural preservation. Younger musicians seek him out not only for his technique, but for his ability to convey meaning, context, and emotional resonance. He instills in them a respect for history, the responsibility of storytelling, and the power of music to shape consciousness. Through teaching, performance, and recording, Sammy creates a legacy that extends far beyond his own life, touching generations of artists, audiences, and communities. Even as age begins to weigh on him, Sammy continues to perform, teach, and mentor. His influence stretches from intimate clubs to larger venues, from local communities to national recognition. The lessons of Mississippi, the night of the juke joint, and the sacrifices of Smoke, Stack, and Annie are embedded in every note he plays. His music becomes both a memorial and a living archive, a way to honor those who perished while ensuring that the stories endure. Sammy's journey emphasizes that the true measure of legacy is not fame or fortune, but the ability to transmit culture, memory, and resilience. Through his music, he ensures that the past is not forgotten, that the struggles and triumphs of those before him continue to resonate, and that each new generation can learn, reflect, and carry forward the lessons embedded in every chord. Sammy, now an elder figure in the blues community, reflects on the life he has lived and the roads he has traveled. The cities he visited, the people he met, and the stories he carried have all left their imprint on him, shaping not only the musician he became, but the custodian of a culture forged in pain, perseverance, and memory. Every note he plays, every story he tells, is infused with the presence of Smoke, Stack, Annie, Pearline, and the others who never left Clarksdale alive, their legacies intertwined with his own. Chicago has changed over the decades. Neighborhoods have risen and fallen. Civil rights movements have reshaped the social landscape, and music itself has evolved, giving birth to new forms influenced by jazz, rock, and R&B. Sammy navigates these changes with both reverence and adaptability. He recognizes that the blues must remain grounded in history while speaking to the present, and he dedicates himself to ensuring the lessons of Mississippi reach ears and hearts far beyond the South. Students who once crowded around him in intimate practice spaces now perform across the country, carrying fragments of the juke joint, fragments of the stories, and fragments of the grief that defined that fateful night. Yet, despite his influence and renown, Sammy remains haunted by what cannot be undone. He visits Clarksdale periodically, walking past the ruins of the juke joint, speaking softly to those who survived, and tracing the echoes of the blood and music that shaped his life. These visits are solemn rituals, moments of reconciliation between memory and present, between grief and survival. They remind him that legacy is not just creation, it is stewardship, a responsibility to bear witness and ensure that nothing is lost to time. Sammy's music becomes both a personal meditation and a public mission. Recording sessions preserve the nuances of the Mississippi sound, the inflections of his cousins' voices, and the emotional weight carried by those who perished. Each record is a time capsule, capturing both anguish and resilience, ensuring that those who were silenced can continue to speak through melody and rhythm. Audiences respond not only to the technical brilliance of his performances, but to the emotional authenticity embedded in every chord, every lyric, every pause. Sammy understands that music is the bridge across generations, a vessel for stories that might otherwise be forgotten. He mentors not only musicians but also storytellers, historians, and archivists who are drawn to the narrative power of the blues. Sammy teaches that music is inseparable from history, that the tales of hardship, injustice, love, and joy are encoded in rhythm and harmony, and that to understand a song is to understand the life that produced it. In doing so, he ensures that the memory of Clarksdale, of Mississippi, and of the night of the juke joint is carried forward, not as myth or legend, but as lived truth. Sammy also contends with the supernatural echoes that linger faintly in his consciousness. While much of the terror of that night has faded into memory, there are moments: quiet streets, smoke-filled rooms, sudden silences, when he senses the presences of the departed. Rather than fear them, he embraces them, allowing their whispers to inform his music, lending an ethereal quality that deepens the emotional resonance of his art. These spectral companions are reminders that history, grief, and memory are never truly gone. They live in the music, in those who remember, and in the acts of creation that keep stories alive. As the decades progress, Sammy becomes a cornerstone of the cultural landscape, sought after by scholars, musicians, and audiences eager to witness the authenticity of a life that has lived through trauma, survival, and artistic triumph. His influence spreads from the streets of Chicago to the concert halls of the world, creating a ripple effect that transforms music into a living archive of resilience, identity, and history. He teaches that the blues is more than a genre. It is a living testimony to the endurance of the human spirit and the power of storytelling through sound. Sammy's personal life, too, reflects both the weight and the reward of his legacy. He forms deep bonds with protégés who become like family, sharing in the responsibility of carrying forward the stories of Clarksdale. He nurtures friendships, witnesses generations grow, and participates in the cultural evolution of a music form that began as both lament and celebration. Through it all, he remains tethered to the past, guided by memories of Smoke, Stack Annie, and Pearline, whose lives, though cut short, continue to shape the present and future. As he approaches the twilight of his life, Sammy's performances take on a ceremonial quality. Each show is a remembrance, each note a tribute, and each audience a witness to the continuity of memory. He plays not for fame or fortune, but to honor the lives lost and the stories that demand preservation. In every city, from the smallest clubs to the largest venues, Sammy ensures that the legacy of Clarksdale's juke joint, its music, and its people continues to resonate, a testimony to resilience, memory, and the power of art to transcend time. In his final performances, Sammy is often accompanied by musicians who are the inheritors of his teachings. Together, they reimagine the music of Clarksdale for contemporary audiences, blending tradition with innovation, and ensuring that each performance is both a tribute and a living, breathing continuation of the past. The blood, grief, and courage of that night live on in their harmonies, rhythms, and melodies, an indelible imprint of history on sound. Sammy's journey comes full circle when he returns one last time to Clarksdale. He stands before the remnants of the juke joint, silent and contemplative. The memories of those lost are vivid, yet instead of pain alone, there is a sense of accomplishment, of survival, and of transmission. He understands that the lives, music, and sacrifices of Smoke, Stack, Annie, Pearline, and countless others are immortal, not because the past can be undone, but because the stories and culture they shaped continue to live through him and all who carry forward their music.